Hey, good afternoon, Tim. I'm looking over the script for today. I'm liking this.
Good, good. What is it you like about it?
Well, I think when I switch from pure technical to much more of the people-oriented side of project management, the whole idea of team building and training and mentoring and collaborating and all that just kind of fits with today's topic. And I know we want to focus a little more on the team building aspects, which to me, I think is pretty exciting.
Yes, it is. It is, and for many reasons. Is there anything specific that grabbed you as you started thinking about teams or team building when you started putting together your thoughts?
Yes, you threw a curve at me, but that's not unusual that we throw curves at each other, right? I
Right.
like this idea, and I'm waiting to get into the discussion of kind of the difference between a good team and an effective team. I think understand the nuance. I think we can have a good discussion around there. But anyway, when we get to that part of our script, I'd be interested in hearing kind of your thought process around where you came up with those two ideas.
Oh, that's great. That's great. Yeah.
But I was thinking as I was preparing for today, um, not all team experiences on projects are wonderful. Sometimes they turn out to be a little less than expected. And I remember, and I'm going to start with a story that has a less than happy ending, because I think it may be a good place to launch for the way that we as project managers want to conduct ourselves and work with our teams to build those teams into functioning, systematic working machines to get projects done. But this was several years ago, and we were dealing with a fairly, I would say, distinctive, lengthy conflict among many of the senior staff of our organization that were involved in a lot of the project work. And there seemed to we came to an impasse at one point, and our senior vice president decided that he would bring in an outside agency. And this outside agency was built around sort of, if you've probably heard of Outward Bound.
Hmm.
Well, it wasn't Outward Bound, but it was modeled after some of the Outward Bound concepts. And I distinctly remember going out into a park area somewhere, I think it was in near Colorado Springs or something. And one of the exercises, we had these 4x4 beams that four of us had to tie to our legs, to our feet, like skis. So four of us are on these 4x4 beams, and we had to sidestep around some trees up a hill to the top of the hill. And the idea being is that we would work together. Are you getting the picture?
Hmm.
That we would work together and kind of work our way up the hill as a team. Well, we eventually made it after many slides and slivers and everything else, right? There were several exercises, something along these lines. And here's why I'm saying that it didn't work in our case. We got back to the office. Many of our problems were still there. The topic of conversation was these stupid exercises in the minds of many people. And so, yes, we were able to move 4x4s up a hill, but we never ever did get to be able to collaborate as a team, even after all of that effort. So sometimes team building doesn't work as prescribed.
Yes, yes. And again, we'll separate this out a little bit, but there's the cohesion and the chemistry of the team, and then there's the performance of the team. And we have to look at both of those. We have to measure, is the team healthy? Do they have a healthy culture? Do they respect each other? Do they work? But at the same time, is the team producing results? One of my friends used to talk about this as, you can have a good team, but a team's not a family. A team is like a sports team. And this actually will lead to our future discussion. But before we get there, how do you define the word team?
I think the easiest, well, the probably more technical definition is it's a coming together of several people for a short period or long period of time, but for a period of time to focus on a series of objectives and to accomplish a single result. Those team members will have different skill levels, will have different competencies, will have different roles, but in working together, the idea is to obtain that objective and that final result. I think that's as technical as I can get in my definition.
Great, great. That's good. We have people coming together for a common goal. Okay, that's a team. And that's how it's defined. Now, we can talk about what a good team is and what an effective team is. So we could actually equate good team with the ability to come together, self-organizing, and they're functional as a group. And effective is that group fulfills its purpose. So in your exercise, you were a good team, but the team was not effective. How does that feel?
I think that's actually pretty good. That's that kind of blends together. In many ways, they cross over, good and effective. But I think what I'm hearing you say is you can be good without being completely effective. You can also be effective, even I suspect, in sort of your dysfunction.
Yes.
Probably less so, but it could happen.
Yes, for true effectiveness, you do have to have that goodness. You have to have what they call T-based skills. It's your depth and your confidence in your own skill set and your ability to connect with others and work with different skill sets for a common objective. That's the term that Agile usually uses for generalizing specialists. They don't have one unique skill that they stay within, but they are really good in approaching unknown work.
Which, yeah, that takes, I think, a even more mature team than sometimes you end up with when you're pulling together a project team.
Right.
Well, I was thinking.
Go ahead.
I was thinking when I was giving that previous more of a technical definition. I remember when I crossed over and started doing work on behalf of the customer, who was hiring vendor teams like the ones I came from. And I remember very specifically in the requests for proposal, it's a point-based system, and the vendor team that ends up with the highest points typically wins the solicitation. And I remember very specifically on several of these coaching my client to put in the fact is, have these people that they are bidding as key staff, have they in fact worked together in a previous project? And if they did, they got more points. So we even back then in those great days of waterfall technology, we recognized that cohesion that comes with working together.
Good. So you're recognizing team building, whether it's happened in the past and we're able to work together a lot easier now, or whether we need to set aside time, and whether we're doing the work or not, we have to have some effort towards learning how to work together, learning how to trust each other, and learning the give and take and the compromise of what it takes to be a member of a group.
Oh, absolutely. And I think besides that, I think there's even some basic skills that we also have to impart in our team members, to on the good side, to make them function well before they can function effectively. Some of that comes down to, can they communicate well? I think is a key part of this whole idea. You and I can't get along unless we communicate well. Fair statement?
Oh, that's more than fair. We can't get along, we can't give each other what we need, and we can't contribute to the same work for a common objective. So yeah, communication is primary when you're looking at building or sustaining a team. It has to be there. There are other attributes as well. Conflict management is a common. Responsibility. I don't have to be told what I need to do. That's a real big skill. And again, we understand the word responsible, but we have different definitions of what responsible means, right? My responsibility means that I get a fresh cup of coffee right before the meeting. And if I don't do that, everything's off, right? And that's my self-starting ritual, right? Your definition of responsibility might be different. So as we build these groups, having these common definitions and having this understanding of how communication works and how to use communication is critical.
Well, not only that, it's just seeing how different, and I think you've already touched on it, is how people define responsibility. You and I are of the generation where, you came to work on time. You left on time or later, but you were on time. A lot of the younger staff that I have worked with in my most recent projects, on time meant different times sometimes, depending on how late they worked the night before or whatever. Now, responsibly, they always got their job done. Responsibly, they always showed up. It's just that for people like you and me, who are used to being there on the dot of time, to us, it felt like they were irresponsible, but to them, they were very responsible. And if you really think about that, almost a clash of cultures in some ways, responsibility, what really ended up taking the team forward is the fact that everyone was still focused on that objective. So whether someone came in at noon and worked till 9 o'clock at night, or someone came in at 7 a.m. and left at 6, didn't matter, as long as you could cross over, have that communication, and keep the project focused. So yes. I think there are different ways of looking at even some of these attributes.
Right. And having a common understanding, creating that project lexicon is one of the most critical activities you can do for creating that. The team actually has components that every group of humans has. It has its cultures, our unwritten rules and laws, and it has our power and authority, our rank, and what we call politics, right? And establishing those consciously, communicating them, and then reaffirming them with our actions is the best thing we can do for setting the course of the team. Before we can expect the team to do stuff, we have to sort of demonstrate those things.
And I think you and I talked a few podcasts ago also that you can also document some of those things. And I'm not a ritualistic documentor, but sometimes it's nice to have a few things maybe on the wall. This is how we work together, but put together a quick team charter whereby people agree that this is how we're going to work together and how we're going to collaborate and how we're going to move the project forward. So I think along with what you just talked about, it's nice to have those agreements up front and then continue on from there.
Right. Now, here's the question that I was heading towards, and I'd like you and me to think about this. I think about it a lot. Do we really build teams? Are people just naturally prone to come together and work as teams, or do we as managers and leaders really, quote unquote, build them?
I've seen, and you can share your experience as well, but I've seen sort of a broad spectrum of this. One time I was dealt a hand of IT developers who were all severely introverted, if I can use that term. Mm-hmm. Teamwork didn't necessarily mean a lot to them. Give me my orders, let me go, I'll code, I'll fix, I'll make sure it works, and somehow we will integrate our code and it'll all work. So that's kind of the one extreme. And then I've also had teams where we had a whole bunch of glad handers, people who love to socialize. And part of that was to, okay, let's socialize. That's great. But at the same time, let's also get our work done. So I think in terms of building teams, if we just let the culture naturally take its course, it won't always work. I think we have to insert ourselves. Your thoughts?
Indeed. And there are common things that we can do to establish it. It's much like building a canal or a channel for water. Water will go downhill, But if you build a canal or channel, it'll go downhill in the way that you desire. And so that's what we do with our teams. Human nature does dictate that we'll come together and we form, norm, storm, and perform, right? But at the same point, I think we can facilitate, and we can, like you said, we can establish a team charter, we can establish ground rules, and we can communicate effectively and set the expectation, and then repeat it and repeat it and repeat it again until everybody's bored of hearing us saying that.
You know, they may be bored, but I had a boss once tell me that no one has learned or no one has heard until they have sort of taken in the 7 times rule. And I said, what's the 7 times rule? And he said, they won't hear it until they've heard it for the 7th time.
Right,
So
right. That's perfect.
Yeah.
That's perfect, Merv. And actually, it's a signal that you are, getting the message across when they say, you already told me that. And I look inside myself and I smile and I say, good, you remember, then this is effective.
But so your question, it's an intriguing one. The question being, what actions can we perform, or in fact, do we affect a team? But can we as project managers create the team? And I think that creating the team or building the team comes first with creating that environment within which the team can gel. And so it's an environment of mutual self-respect. So I don't care if you're the database administrator with tons of years under your belt and deeply respected for your skills versus the administrative assistant who's trying to put together the next staff or the next status report. I don't care where you are along that continuum. There is a mutual respect and we all have something to offer. So I think if we can create that kind of an environment where everyone can grow, I think that's our part of creating that team, of building that team, and let them then work within those boundaries that we've just created.
Yes, because the same things that help the team become good are also going to be the things that help the team become effective. Like you said, we have people who are really experienced and people who lack a lot of experience or lack a lot of confidence even. And one of the things that I notice in my classes, a lot of the people who are knowledgeable in project management are saying, why do these guys ask all these questions? Let's stop the questions and just have Tim tell us what the facts are so we can move on. And I find myself emphasizing one of my mantras that I used on my old projects, which is, we all cross the line together. We have one objective and we move across the finish line as a group. And it's funny because groups are groups and teams are teams. And we have to understand that the strongest and the weakest of us will both cross the finish line together.
That you just reminded me, and I wish I could remember who told this to me one time. But we were sitting there and we were in a meeting and the finger pointing started. And you know how that happens every once in a while when there's frustration and stress and you're behind schedule and stuff. And this person who I wish I could remember who it was, but this person looked at all of us and said, it doesn't help to sit there and look at the other person and say, your end of the boat is sinking. I mean,
I love that.
Isn't that great?
Yes.
So finger pointing doesn't work, because if that end of the boat sinks, so will mine.
Exactly. And that resonates so well when we're working on common work. So this leads into what do we do in building a team then, in supporting, and what are the things that we can put into the team's activities that help them understand how to get over their I hate to use the word selfishness. It's not negative selfishness, their self-centeredness, but at the same point, help them also become strong in what they're doing while they're working and getting comfortable with working with others in their environment? What are the actions we can do?
Well, I like what you just said, the whole idea of selfishness, because I think you could leverage that. People selfishly want that next promotion. People selfishly want that recognition. But if you can build into that selfishness, the idea, the co-idea that you will get your selfish desire if you help the entire team get its full focused selfish desire, then I think the two can work together very strongly. So I think that's one thing we can do, is to promote that selfishness by saying teamwork helps you get your next promotion and your next pay raise.
Yep, we call that motivation, and it's fulfillment of a personal need. That's what the technical term is, or what academia calls it. It's Maslow's. Everybody has needs, and Maslow did a good job of mapping personal needs. And if you can connect the work to the individuals. So what you're saying is, in order to get a team functioning well, you have to work with the individuals. Is that what you're saying? Or at least understand them?
But both, I think both. Understanding obviously first, but I think secondly, the whole idea of working with individuals as and working within the team itself, you recognize very quickly people with great strengths and people with opportunities for improvement. And sometimes we call those weaknesses or whatever it is, and sometimes I leave weaknesses alone because they're not interfering and I play on the strengths. Sometimes I can see someone with huge potential and I work with that person in their areas of improvement. So even as individuals, as we work with every single individual and play on their strengths and improve those areas that we can, that also contributes mightily, I think, to building that team and having a lot of success in building it that way as well.
Good. I like that. I like that a lot.
You said something earlier about setting expectations. I think that, you want to elaborate on that? I think that also helps.
Yeah. So one of the things that I was thinking about, some of the primary actions that I brainstorm on as I'm looking at opportunities to grow the team, are getting the team to participate in coming up with ideas about how the team will work well together. It's not just selecting communication tools we're going to use. Should we use WebEx or Zoom? It's how do we effectively work together? And I've found if you can get people to, number one, contribute ideas and put the ideas into the way they work together, and number two, get everybody to vote and get everybody to commit to the results of the vote, all of a sudden you have commitment and obligation, right? And you can actually set expectations quite easily if it's their own ideas. If you give them my ideas, there's a small chance that they may be able to say, well, Tim didn't come up with a good idea. And when you say the group came up with an idea, again, they may pick on one or two individuals, but at the same time, as a member of the group and voting, they're accountable because they didn't participate in pushing back.
Well, I think part of that also leads to building trust. And if you can build trust, that's another element or another action that we can perform. And again, you can't say, Tim, you need to trust Maribel. We can't say that kind of stuff, but we can put that environment in place again. And your example with the kind of a brainstorming and in voting and then coming together as a team on the agreement, I think that's a great way of building trust. Because, go ahead.
Yeah, and not only that, but reflecting as a group, we actually learned how to do this, and we learned how to do it better. Using you're basically the Jiminy Cricket, like in the old Walt Disney movie, right? Dumbo, where Jiminy Cricket or Pinocchio, where Jiminy Cricket is the conscience of the character, right? And you're sort of the conscience. And when you look at good results, you say, hey, I guess this paid off. We did well. And hearing that we did well is a validation that we're starting to behave as a group, and it triggers some interesting chemicals in our brains. At the same time, if we can repeat that occurrence, there's a higher probability that we're going to get that experience in the future. And that's where trust is. If I'm actually don't have to remind you that, I need a report every Tuesday morning, and if that report just shows up on my desk, that trust is not an emotional thing. Okay, it's not something emotional. It's due to the experience of repeated actions that provides a higher probability that it's going to happen in the future. That's trust, and that's confidence.
And it's team building. It all kind of works together.
Yeah, exactly.
And I don't want to leave out the social aspects.
Mm.
Because you said earlier, we're not a family. It's true, we are not a family. So, as a family, my wife and I have movie night, or we have the kids over, those sorts of things. We're not necessarily that way, but there are those times that we can come together as a group and do those social aspects. I remember I was doing a project in an eastern state, and we ended up taking the entire team out to Top Golf. You've probably heard of Top Golf. It was a great time. We had people there who had never golfed in their lives, but they got a stick and they beat a ball and they had a lot of fun. And we laughed at each other, we laughed with each other, and we had a great time. And it was a fun time of building that team. So social aspects are clearly something that we need to pay attention to.
Yes, and for many reasons. Number one, the whole aspect of engagement. Am I relevant? Do I even matter? This is what a project manager can provide to others to inspire individual confidence. Am I relevant? What would happen if I was 2 hours late? Nothing. And be able to say it in a positive manner that we need you. Your success is critical. Now, that can come from the project manager. But what if, as a project manager, I trained my team to do that as a group? And when they notice somebody is not pulling their weight, or they're becoming disengaged, they actually start reaching out and start pulling them in. And it's critical to have this. But think about, in this new world of remote work, it's almost more critical for this to occur.
Oh, absolutely. And there are things that people can do in remote work. And I just want to go back there. You just reminded me of something where the project manager, or the team lead in this case, didn't start the process of having this team exercise. But I was going through my Facebook one morning just to kind of check in on what was going on, and happened to catch a photo of some of the people on our team doing something I'd never heard of, called goat yoga.
Oh, wow.
Goat yoga. And people can look it up online. It's a real thing. But what struck me was, this was an activity that they got together, not the whole team, but several members of the team, and just got together and just did this on their own as part of that team building exercise within the team. And the looks on their faces on those Facebook posts were pure joy. They were just having a lot of fun.
Yeah. And I recommend for a lot of teams, and many managers I advise, I say, use the communication tools that you have for your remote workers, for social activities, like, sharing a coffee break, or sharing a meal, or doing these downtime activities that people enjoy together. It does add to the depth of a team, and the good team aspects.
Well, it adds to that. Plus, you need a break. The one downfall that I've heard, the part that I did not enjoy about the COVID experience, even though I wasn't traveling, was the fact that sometimes I'd look up from my desk and 3 hours had gone by, and I realized I hadn't taken a break. just in those situations where team members can call each other up on Zoom and take a break together, because you need that relief from intense work at the desk.
Right. So here, let's switch gears a little bit. What parts of working with a team and growing with a team are really fun for you?
You and I have talked about this a few times. Part of my most fun experiences on projects was diversity of personnel. And when I say diversity, I'm talking all sorts of diversity, especially ethnic cultural differences. And, for example, we worked with people from India, and when they celebrated Diwali, they invited us all to celebrate Diwali. And it was something that Westerners weren't necessarily exposed to, but once exposed to, we looked forward to next year's Diwali.
Oh, yeah.
And then they were exposed to our Christmas celebration, or some people call it the winter holidays. So that cultural disparity, which became cultural integration, was probably some of the most fun aspects of the projects that I worked on. And especially when it came to the food.
Yes. And that's where I was going. The diversity is really interesting, but finding a common theme. Now, it's funny because in conflict management, one of the ways you manage conflict is finding one common idea that everybody can agree with as a group. And so part of team building that I've learned is when you first go to a new city as a team, you have the team as part of their daily activities, select and vote on the food. And more often than not, these dinners become family style, which means everybody puts their meals in the middle and we sample from each other. And not only that, but everybody has their own preference. But being able to compare all the others gives them conversation and gives them a discussion that they can use to explore the backgrounds and the behaviors of others in a way that's safe and comfortable. And this is the best way to build a team. Yeah, it's all about the food. It's all about the food.
You just remind, this one keeps coming. This is years ago, but it keeps coming back to my memory. Now, I don't know what your experience with Asian food, particularly Chinese food, was like, but I grew up in the Midwest in Canada. And so Chinese food tended to be, what you found in the prairies in small towns. Every small town had a Chinese restaurant. But what was it? It was chop suey. It was, those sort of westernized Chinese dishes. Well, I thought that was Chinese food. So my very first big job, where I moved to the big city of Vancouver, where we had a very diverse but culturally ethnic Chinese population that didn't know what chop suey and chow mein and these things were. Mm-hmm. They took us to authentic Chinese restaurants as they would have experienced back in their homeland before they came to Canada in this case. Some of those we would part curtains and go in where my friends and I were the only Caucasians in the entire place. But what you just reminded me of was one of the young women on my project had just been in Canada for a couple of years, and she wanted me to try her authentic Szechuan cuisine. And I told her the kinds of things I liked. And so then she took pieces of different kinds of food and put them on my plate and said, try this, knowing that as a Midwesterner, not really being used to the Chinese food she was used to, she then proceeded to put a very hot pepper on my plate and said, enjoy this.
Oh, that's great. Yeah,
we bonded for about 3 seconds while I choked.
I actually was acclimatized this very early, even before I graduated high school. My dad was a professor at a state university up in the Pacific Northwest. And he often would bring grad students over for holidays. And since a lot of the grad students were from out of the country, he'd show them, again, like you said, very traditional Midwest holiday meals, and then they'd actually return in kind and bring to our house and cook with us their food. And I met a guy who in the 1950s, when he was 9 years old, walked out of mainland China to Hong Kong. I met another guy who grew up in a small Indian village in Alaska. I met a young woman who grew up in the Philippines and became a leader in the police community there, and then came to the United States as a capstone activity. And they all had food, they all had a story, and they all had just being entertained by sharing this background in this context. It was a great experience.
So what other aspects of the kind of fun? One of the things that comes to my mind is the whole idea of brainstorming.
Oh yeah.
You end up with a problem that you could solve by bringing people together, and sometimes the idea comes from the least likely person, and that is more fun than anything.
Yeah. Identifying, in a team, there's always something I call a canary in the cage. They have the lowest acceptance of risk, right? They're highly sensitive to risk. And when I say canary in a cage, everybody knows what they mean, right? It means as a miner, you go down, the canary gets sick before you do, and you know where the poisonous gases are. Well, I usually point them out, and I used to really be frustrated by these people until I learned how to position them as an effective member of the group. Their skills that got under my skin, that hit my nerves wrong, were the very skills that made them powerful, because I could actually use them in context and say, oh, that's my early sensitive, my early warning system there. And I learned how to thank them for their input and their contributions instead of seeing them as an obstacle.
Well, and if I was a young project manager listening to us today, and I would be thinking, why are they talking about having fun in building teams? We've got a project to deliver. And I think that's what I want to get across with this discussion that you and I are having. We went from culture to diversity to food, and now to watching people grow, into collaboration, into brainstorming, into all this kind of, that is project management. It's not just focus on timeline. It's not just Gantt charts on the wall that you're trying to follow. It's really building that team so that Gantt chart can explode in progress in the way it moves forward.
And yes, I had joy when I experienced joy when I learned the mechanics of earned value, or the 3-point weighted estimation tool. Okay. Yeah. I experienced a joy there, but as a leader, I get to re-experience it every time I see that light bulb go on with different people.
Yeah.
That is why I'm a leader.
And when I've experienced this, when I have a person who's for whom English is a second language, come to me and say, I want to learn to speak and write English better now that I'm in the United States, and offers to do the status report under my tutelage.
Oh, wow.
Talk about an incredible learning experience, watching that person grow. Now, those first 5 or 6 attempts are awful. But that's not the point. The point is that person has taken the initiative and has come to me, and it may slow down that particular task on the project for now, but think of the alleviation of my task 5 or 6 project status reports down the road when that person is doing it on my behalf, and all I have to do is check it over and sign it off.
Yeah, and number one, you have an effective person who now, from now on, has a skill that you can rely on, and they are much more invested in your project or projects because you took the time and you recognized them.
And so again, for our young project managers, listen to us. It's not all about the Gantt chart. It's not all about the task.
Yeah,
Those a happy team, and make sure once you develop that happy team, that well functioning, and I want to get back to the effectiveness as well at some point, but that effective team, the Gantt chart takes care of itself.
That's right. That's right. All the effort you do in your early years as a project manager from a mechanic standpoint, you're driving the project by its data and its analysis, and that's good. That's good. But there's a point where you realize that that's just 5 or 10% of the work. The real work is establish a foundation and an environment so it's easy to get the good work done. And like you said, you do that, the water doesn't just go down the hill. It follows the canals and channels, and you get to sit back and just float sticks down there.
And can I offer one more thing that I have absolutely loved about project work? And that is the relationships that were built that last well beyond the project. I still have, and I'm going to call them friends because they are, from projects that I worked on in the 1980s. And when I'm in their territory or when they're in my area, we still contact each other and get together. We still trade cards at the end of the year. We still trade handwritten notes for birthdays. And this could be 30, 40 years later. That is, to me, we talked about what's fun. That's more than just fun. That is, that's an experiential part of projects that you just can't get away from, those relationships.
Yeah. Oh, indeed. So we're talking about team building, and we looked at the aspect of training a little bit. Let's go ahead and delve a little bit more into that. Training, would you agree that training is a critical component of team building the skills and attributes?
Yeah, and now you're testing my knowledge from when we did this podcast last week, right? Because didn't we talk about training last week in our podcast? But yes, I agree with you. Training is an absolute must. First of all, competencies and skills. You have to have those. You can bring on the brightest and the best, but if they don't have the skill in a particular technology, you need to bring them up to speed in that technology. So that part of training to make them a competent member of the team is absolutely critical. And then you and I also talked about some of those other qualities or attributes or emotional intelligence attributes that we also don't necessarily train into our staff, but we can mentor into our staff. And so that's also a learning experience.
Yeah, and it's not just the experience through training, but it's the perception of their ability to do it well, which we call confidence too, right? Let's take two variables and let's look at different team members based on those two variables. We'll do a truth table. So you have somebody with low confidence and low experience, somebody with low confidence and high experience, and then somebody with high confidence and low experience, right? Let's take the two in the middle, the high confidence, low experience, and low confidence, high experience. It almost begs the solution for how you're going to train them and how you're going to engage them, doesn't it?
It almost does. You almost want to put them together in the same team and say, work with each other, have at it.
But yeah, there's one way to train to give them experience in their skills, but there's another way to train so they can do something enough and repeat it and get better at it enough so they can build their confidence. And the training of the two are going to be a little bit different.
So tell me, one was high confidence, low
experience.
Yeah, that particular one, you just, as a project manager, what I would do in a situation like that would be I would leverage that confidence and give them more and more difficult tasks to kind of help them, feed their own egos, if I can use that it doesn't have to be an ego thing, but to kind of feed their own confidence, to bolster their confidence by being able to accomplish tougher and tougher tasks.
Yeah, and another aspect of that is having them do work that slows them down and forces them to analyze their steps so they can understand it. And instead of just think that they know it, actually comprehend it. And so again, have them do not just the task, but have them collect the data, put together maybe 2 or 3 indicators that show how they're doing, and then have about 4 or 5 minutes every 3 or 4 days say, how's this doing, what does it look like, and let's look back at what you did earlier and see how you've improved.
Now, the other person I think is a little more challenging, and that's the highly experienced one, but has low confidence. And that almost begs sort of a low self-esteem situation.
Mm-hmm.
And I think in a situation like that, pairing them up with someone else where they can impart their experience to a less experienced team member, perhaps can develop their confidence because, hey, I really do know this, because I've just helped that person, and that person got better because I helped that person. So I think there are ways to, without calling it out, to help that person develop that confidence to match their skill levels.
Yeah, you're paying attention with that person and observing their self-awareness, right?
Yeah.
And you're also giving them some repeat activity. And whether you're observing them or whether they're doing it with somebody else, making sure that they understand they're doing something over and over and over again, and making sure that they understand and they can observe that, hey, more often than not, I'm doing it right.
Yeah.
And also emphasizing early in development of a skills, you're not expected to do it perfect. Perfect is the enemy of progress. I'm willing to say that. Just enough and good enough is what gets us started down the road. And perfection oftentimes just keeps us on the side of the road, not thinking that we can even go forward.
Well, I'll tell you, I've been in situations where our good enough is incredibly good for our customer. And we're thinking that we're shortchanged, not really shortchanging, but we're thinking we could have done better, and our customer is elated. So that is exactly right. Perfect can be the enemy of good, and good enough can be good enough.
Exactly. And it's not our perception that we're looking at. And this is something that we can actually communicate and set expectation, not just with our teams, but our stakeholders. Good enough and what is acceptable and what is functional and what is value. This we cannot answer without the input of our stakeholders. They are going to determine these indicators and metrics that we're going to use.
But you asked a good question around training, because I think training is one thing, but how does training fit into team building, which is kind of the main topic of what we're doing today? So I think if I really think through that, I think training can be almost looked at as a skill or a competency-based training, perhaps some mentoring, but it's almost at the individual level. Whereas team building tends to be working with the entire team holistically to get them moving along as a single moving machine, moving that project forward. That's kind of the distinction that I would draw, because even within team building, you have to build competencies. You have to train, but I think, I keep using the word I think, I know that using them as a holistic team and developing them that way, I think is very, very helpful.
Yes, and the best people are the effective coaches of children's sports. Football, or in the US, right? Soccer.
Yeah.
You start off with drills and skills, right? And the skills are the ones that you go over and over and over and over and over and over again. And the coach is observing and find out who's naturally better at running and who's naturally better at kicking and who's naturally better at blocking. But everybody has to learn each one of these, right?
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden they say, okay, let's do drills. I need you three over here. You're a kicker, you're a blocker, you're a runner. You have three over here. You're a kicker, you're a blocker, and you're a runner. Now we get to learn how to work as a team. And so there's a crossover between the individual training, which is building the individual skills and understanding the skills of others. And then there's the team building. And training can happen not just at the individual skills, but as the group works together. Because inside the group, I don't just have to get better at my individual skill. I have to get better at how my skill improves the skills of others and how my skill is critical for the others to do their job to help do it. Like a kicker is going to have to kick in front of the runner. A blocker is going to have to block in front of the kicker and the runner. And the kicker is going to have to hold back and control their excitement so that they can actually have effective kicking.
That's exactly right. And having played sports all my life, I understand, you know, when I played a lot of hockey, and the words of the immortal Gretzky came to me every time and that is, you don't skate to where the puck is, you skate to where the puck is going to be. So the idea is that you follow through, and that team member has to be able to feed that pass to you. So
and that's, you know, it's not just a sports concept, it's a group concept. Whether it was 50,000 years ago in the middle of an ice age, or whether we're right now in the middle of this project, you know, our target is not our status. Our target is our forecast, and it's a continually moving target. And so our progress and our status are just data that we use to refine where we're going to kick next. And we can actually use these, and people understand it tacitly. We're naturally prone to actually work well as a group.
well, and the other thing that I was thinking of, going back to your earlier discussion or differentiation between a good team and an effective team. You know, I don't want people to go away from this podcast thinking it's all up to the project manager to make that happen, right? It's not up to the project manager to make a good team, or yes, it is to set the environment, but there's more to it. And I think one of the questions that I'd like to pose to you is, how do we instill within members of our team to need to know that they need to become good without necessarily us as project managers pushing them in that direction?
We're talking about motivation again, and it's value based. It's, again, I hate to say this, but it's how every small group has grown. It's winning the hearts and minds of the individual and aligning the hearts and minds of the individual with the focus and the objective and the vision of the group. So we have to start before the team actually starts and understand with ourselves what motivates us, what is our vision, what's our purpose on this project. And if we have that clarity, and if we understand how to help other people, because the mechanics of how we are motivated and the mechanics of how we perceive purpose and vision are the exact mechanics that are inside of every human. So if we can do this for ourselves, we can also help each other on the path. But you're right, we can only open that door. Motivation is not pushing them through the door. It's opening the door and giving them a reason to walk through. But in the end, we have to have them walk through.
Yeah, and I had talked earlier about building an environment of respect, mutual respect for one another. So again, I can't order you to respect your fellow worker, but I can create that environment that shows the worth of every individual, and such that people who respect each other are recognized, rewarded, however you want to put it, but that it becomes a team element where everyone respects each other. So that's exactly right. It does start with the project manager, but it doesn't have to be the project manager's sole job to keep every single team member striving to become good as a good team member. I don't mean a good skilled person, but as a good team member.
Yeah, and actually, as we progress in our understanding, we can continue to grow. For instance, I've been studying physiobiology, the neurotransmitters, the chemicals that fire in our brains, and the selfish ones that actually, help me go a little further than I used to. I get a reward for doing that. Or maybe I passed a goal and I made a benchmark. That's selfish, and it's good selfish, like we talked about. But there's a couple other neurotransmitters that actually are triggered when we are part of a group. And there are other neurotransmitters that are triggered when we're mentoring, when we're in a parental role. We're actually physically and chemically rewarded when we perform this. And so all we have to do is create the experience for people to do this, and they get that taste. And it's a personal experience from them, and they can't control it because it's their bodies that are doing it. It's not their minds.
Yeah, if we can get everyone to that point in a naturally functioning way, we do have a good team, and I will argue we would have an effective team.
Yes, because the good team will have a goal, and the good team will know where they're going, and therefore they will support the group in attaining that goal. And that's where we're going with that whole effective concept.
And it always comes back. I think every single podcast we have done, we've always come back to communication. In fact, we've probably always come back to communication and relationship. Because you cannot have people understanding how good they are or how to become good unless they can communicate that goodness through deed, through word, through action, through whatever.
Yeah, and it's the engagement. It's the engagement, whether you're sharing information engagement or whether you're doing the work engagement. You need that communication. You need that interaction in order for it to even occur.
Well, and I'd mentioned just a little while ago about how our team went to Top Golf. And the funniest thing was people who had never held a golf club before trying to swing and hit a golf ball and missing, and getting the laughter of their teammates behind them, not laughing at them, but laughing with them. And so that it became a socially acceptable norm to have fun with each other. And then the next day when they went back to the office, they were talking about that even as they were configuring their next project or their next piece of code. So it was a great time. And so all of that comes together and contributes to good team collaboration and good team involvement.
Very good. Okay, so we have actually had a really good discussion here. Is there any other final words that you have for talking about team building and the finesse of building teams?
Well, in the minute we have left, I'd be interested in knowing, we kind of started on this topic where it's not the project manager's duty to make every team effective or good, that we can create the environment. But is there such a thing as building a team, as putting too much effort into building a team from a project manager's perspective?
I always boil this down to a simple formula. Is it getting in the way of the project progress? Yeah. Anything that involves, stepping away from the project and actually slowing down the work or spending too much money or lowering the quality expectations or impacting in a negative manner relationships. If it's doing that, you're doing too much. And investing up to that point is what's valuable.
And it comes back full circle for what is our job as a project manager. That's to get the client's objectives in focus and to meet the expected outcomes of the project. So it all comes full circle.
Mhm.
Great discussion.
Yes, it was. Thank
So
you very
we're-
much for this, Merv.
Yeah, that's been good. Where can we talk to you during the week, Tim?
I'm still over at LinkedIn primarily. In the weeks and months to come, I'll be announcing my Twitter and my Instagram and other places that I'm going to communicate. But yeah, reach out to me, LinkedIn. I'm currently very deep in a couple projects right now, but this is just temporary, and I really enjoy hearing from all of you.
Well, thanks to this podcast, this actually my blog's first in this podcast. I came to the attention of a group, and now I am also out of retirement and am gainfully employed for a little while, something I wasn't necessarily wanting. So I have not been as active on LinkedIn as I once was. But again, Merv Jersak at LinkedIn, you can find me there, and also on my website at peoplefirstprojectmanagement.com.
Excellent. And there's lots of really good content out there. If any of you are interested, look at Merv's blogs, and the depth and the breadth of the articles that he have. It's just astounding.
I should study some of those before I get on these podcasts.
What did I write?
Yeah, what did I say? I hope I didn't go. No, this becomes so inculcated in our being that it's hard to contradict ourselves even after this many years. So
Very good.
I enjoyed this, Tim, and we will see you again next week.
That sounds great. Thanks again, Merv, and thanks everybody for checking us out and look at us, subscribe and ring the bell and do whatever you want, but stay in contact. And we'd love to hear questions and comments.
Absolutely. All right, until next time.
Thanks again.